Karen's sisters thought my ranch was their personal shortcut. They drove through my crops, scared my animals, and posted it on social media for laughs. But when I finally fought back, their expensive car got stuck in a place that taught them a lesson they'll never forget. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. The first time I saw that bright red BMW tearing across my wheat field, I thought someone was having an emergency. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring. I was fixing a broken water pump near the barn when I heard the engine roaring. Not the steady hum of a tractor or the rumble of a pickup truck. This was different. High-pitched, angry, like a sports car going way too fast. I looked up just in time to see a shiny red BMW flying over the small hill that separates my property from the county road. Dust kicked up behind it like a tornado. The car wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was speeding up. Inside I could see two women. Both blonde. Both laughing like they were on the best ride at the county fair. The driver had her window down, music blasting so loud I could hear the bass from 50 yards away. The passenger was hanging her arm out the window, phone in hand, recording everything. They cut straight through my wheat field. Stalks that had taken months to grow got crushed under their tires. My dog started barking. The chickens scattered. Even old Bull, my prize bull, moved away from the fence like he knew trouble when he saw it. The BMW didn't stop. It kept going, cutting a path through my property like I'd built a highway just for them. They drove right past my no trespassing signs, past my fence posts, past everything that should have told them this was private land. When they finally disappeared over the ridge on the other side of my property, I was left standing there with my mouth open. 30 feet of wheat ruined. Tire tracks carved deep into the soil. And somewhere in town, two women who thought my ranch was their personal racetrack. I figured it was a one-time thing. Rich people getting lost, maybe following bad GPS directions. It happens. City folks don't always understand how country roads work. But I was wrong. The next day they came back. Same car. Same music. Same two women acting like they owned the place. This time I was ready. I grabbed my truck keys and chased after them, but by the time I got to the road they were gone. All I found were more tire tracks and a few pieces of trash they'd thrown out their window. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. This was intentional. The third time it happened, I was waiting for them. I'd spent the morning putting up new private property signs. Big ones. Bright yellow ones that you could see from space. I even added a chain across the dirt path they'd been using to get onto my land. Right on schedule, here came the BMW. Music pumping. Windows down. The driver saw the chain and slammed on the brakes, stopping just short of it. For a second I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message. Then the passenger door opened. Out stepped a woman in her 30s, wearing designer jeans and a tank top that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. She had that look. You know the one. The "I want to speak to your manager" look that comes with perfectly styled hair and an attitude that could cut glass. She walked right up to my chain like it was personally insulting her. "Excuse me," she called out, looking around until she spotted me standing by my truck. "This chain is blocking our route." Our route. Like they had some kind of right to drive through my property. "That's the point," I said, walking over. "This is private property. You're trespassing." She looked at me like I just told her the earth was flat. "Trespassing? We're just taking a shortcut. A shortcut through my ranch. Without permission." The driver got out too. She was younger, maybe mid-20s, with the same blonde hair and the same attitude. Sisters, I guessed. They had that matching look that only comes from growing up rich and entitled. "Look," the driver said, "we're not hurting anything. We're just trying to get to the highway faster. Your little dirt road saves us 20 minutes. "My little dirt road goes through my wheat field," I said. "You've already damaged about $100 worth of crops." The first sister, the one who'd gotten out first, actually laughed. $100? Seriously? Do you know how much gas costs? We're saving more than that just by not having to drive around. I stared at her. "You're saving gas money by driving through my field?" "Exactly. And you think that gives you the right to trespass?" "It's just empty land," the driver said. "You're not even using it." "It's wheat," I said. "I'm growing wheat. That's what those green plants are that you keep running over." They both looked at the field like they were seeing it for the first time. Then the first sister shrugged. "Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you put your farm in the middle of our shortcut." I blinked. "Before I put my farm in the middle of your shortcut?" "Yeah. This is 2024. People need to get places fast. Maybe find a different place to grow your, whatever that is." "Wheat," I said again. "And I've been growing it here for 15 years. Well, we've been using this route for 3 weeks, the driver said. So I think we have just as much right to be here as you do. 3 weeks. They'd been trespassing for 3 weeks and somehow thought that gave them rights to my land. Let me explain something, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. This is my property. I own it. You don't have any right to be here. None. According to who? The first sister asked. According to the law. And the deed. And common sense. Well, we'll see about that, she said, pulling out her phone. I'm calling the police. I couldn't help but laugh. You're calling the police? Me? For trespassing on my own land? You're preventing us from using a public road, the driver said. It's not a public road. It's my driveway. It connects 2 public roads, the first sister said. That makes it public. I realized I was dealing with people who had no idea how property rights worked. Or maybe they just didn't care. Listen, I said, I don't want any trouble. Just turn around, go back the way you came, and use the actual roads like everyone else. Problem solved. We're not turning around, the driver said. This is the fastest way to get where we're going. Then you're going to have to find a different way. We're not doing that either. I looked at the chain, then at them, then back at the chain. These women weren't going to listen to reason. They weren't going to respect my property rights. They weren't even going to acknowledge that what they were doing was wrong. Fine, I said. But this chain stays up. And if you trespass again, I'm calling the sheriff. Good luck with that, the first sister said. My husband's a lawyer. He'll have your little chain removed by tomorrow. They got back in their car and drove away, but I could hear them laughing as they left. Laughing at me. Laughing at my property. Laughing at the idea that I might actually try to stop them. That night, I called the sheriff's department. The dispatcher was polite but not very helpful. We'll send someone out if we can, she said. But unless you catch them in the act, there's not much we can do. I did catch them in the act, I said. They were standing right there admitting they'd been trespassing for weeks. Do you have video? No, but I have witnesses. Who? Me. I'm the witness. She sighed. Sir, for trespassing charges, we really need independent witnesses or video evidence. Otherwise, it's just your word against theirs. It's my property. I understand that. But proving someone was trespassing without independent evidence can be difficult. I hung up frustrated. The law was supposed to protect property owners, but apparently, it only worked if you could prove the crime was happening. And these 2 sisters were smart enough to only trespass when no one else was around. The next morning I found the chain cut. Not just removed. Cut. With bolt cutters. The heavy-duty chain I'd paid $50 for was lying in pieces on the ground. And there were fresh tire tracks leading right through my wheat field. I called the sheriff's department again. This time they sent a deputy out. He was a young guy, probably new to the job, and he seemed genuinely interested in helping. So they cut your chain? He asked, looking at the pieces. Yep. And then drove through my field again. Any idea who did it? I told him about the BMW and the 2 sisters. He wrote it all down in his notebook. Thing is, he said, without seeing them do it, I can't arrest anyone. But I can drive by more often, maybe catch them in the act. That would be great, I said. In the meantime, you might want to put up some cameras. If you can get them on video, we can definitely press charges. Cameras. Why hadn't I thought of that? That afternoon, I drove to the electronics store in town and bought 2 trail cameras. The kind hunters used to watch for deer. They were motion activated and could record in the dark. Perfect for catching trespassers. I mounted one on a fence post near where the sisters had been entering my property. The other one I hid in a tree overlooking the path they'd been using. If they came back, I'd have them on video. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I was eating breakfast when I heard the familiar sound of a sports car engine. I looked out my kitchen window and saw the red BMW racing across my field again. Same path. Same speed. Same complete disregard for my property. I grabbed my phone and ran outside, but by the time I got to where I could see them, they were already gone. Just more tire tracks and more damaged crops. But this time I had cameras. I waited until evening to check the footage. I wanted to make sure they were really gone before I went out to the cameras. The last thing I needed was to run into them while I was collecting evidence. The first camera had caught everything. The BMW pulling up to where my chain had been. The passenger getting out and looking around. The driver revving the engine. Then both of them laughing as they drove straight through my field. But the second camera had caught something even better. As they were driving through my property, the passenger was filming with her phone. Not just taking pictures. Actually recording a video. And she was talking to the camera, clearly narrating what they were doing. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language made it clear she was treating this like some kind of adventure. Like trespassing was fun. Like damaging my crops was a game. The next morning, I took the memory cards from both cameras and drove to the sheriff's department. The same deputy from before was working, and he seemed excited to see the footage. "This is perfect," he said, watching the video on his computer. "Clear shots of their faces, their license plate, everything. We can definitely press charges now." "What kind of charges?" I asked. "Trespassing for sure. Maybe criminal mischief for the damage to your crops. And if they cut your chain, that's destruction of property." "How long will this take?" "I'll file the report today. We'll probably issue warrants by the end of the week." I left the sheriff's department feeling better than I had in weeks. Finally, these entitled sisters were going to face some consequences for their actions. But I was wrong again. The deputy called me 3 days later with bad news. The sisters had been arrested, but they'd been released on bail within hours. And their lawyer was already fighting the charges. "Their attorney is claiming the path through your property is an easement," the deputy explained. "He says they have a legal right to use it." "An easement? Based on what?" "They're saying it's been used as a public road for years. Something about adverse possession or public right-of-way." I knew enough about property law to know this was nonsense. An easement requires years of documented use, and these two had only been trespassing for a few weeks. But apparently, their lawyer was going to make the prosecutor prove that. "What does this mean for the charges?" I asked. "It means we'll have to wait for a judge to decide. Could take months." Months. Meanwhile, these two were free to keep trespassing while their lawyer tied up the courts with frivolous legal arguments. I was starting to understand why people take the law into their own hands. That weekend the sisters came back. Same car, same attitude, same complete disregard for my property. But this time they brought friends. I watched from my kitchen window as 3 cars pulled up to my property line. The red BMW, a white Mercedes, and a black Range Rover. 7 or 8 people total, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a country club magazine. They didn't just drive through my field this time. They stopped. They got out. They started taking pictures of themselves in front of my wheat field like it was some kind of tourist attraction. One of the women, one of the original sisters, was clearly the leader. She was directing the others, telling them where to stand, what poses to make. She had a professional camera instead of just a phone, and she was treating my property like her personal photography studio. I'd had enough. I grabbed my truck keys and drove out to where they were standing. When I got close, I could hear them laughing and talking about how rustic and authentic everything looked. "Excuse me," I called out as I got out of my truck. "You're trespassing." The sister with the camera looked up like I was interrupting something important. "Oh, it's you again." "Yes, it's me. The owner of this property. And you're trespassing. Again." "Actually," she said, "our lawyer says we have every right to be here. This is a public easement." "Your lawyer is wrong." "We'll see about that." One of the other women, someone I hadn't seen before, stepped forward. She was older, maybe in her 50s, and she had that look that comes from years of getting her way through intimidation. "Young man," she said, "I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just kick people off public land. It's not public land. It's my land." "According to who?" "According to the county recorder's office. And the tax assessor. And the deed I have locked in my safe." "Well, we're not doing anything wrong," the first sister said. "We're just taking some pictures. On my property. Without permission. It's not hurting anything." I looked around at the tire tracks, the trampled wheat, the garbage they'd left behind from their previous visits. "You've already caused hundreds of dollars in damage." "That's not our problem," the older woman said. "If you don't want people on your land, maybe you should put up a fence." "I have signs. And a chain that you cut." "We didn't cut anything," the first sister said. "That chain was already broken when we got here." I stared at her. She was lying right to my face and she didn't even care that I knew it. "Look," I said, "I've been patient. I've called the sheriff. I've followed the law. But this ends now. Get off my property and don't come back." "Or what?" the older woman asked. "Or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Good luck with that," the first sister said. "Our lawyer says the charges against us are going to be dropped. Something about improper evidence collection." I felt my jaw clench. These people weren't just trespassing. They were mocking me. They were treating my property like their playground and laughing about it. "You know what?" I said. "You're right. I should put up a fence. A big one. With barbed wire." "You can't do that," the older woman said. "Not if this is a public easement." Then I guess we'll find out, won't we? I got back in my truck and drove away, but I could hear them laughing behind me. Laughing at me. Again. That night I started planning. If the legal system wasn't going to protect my property, I'd have to protect it myself. Not with violence or anything illegal, but with good old-fashioned country ingenuity. I spent the next week studying the path the sisters had been using. They always came from the same direction, always drove the same route through my field, always exited at the same spot. They were creatures of habit, and habits could be used against them. The path they used went through a low spot in my field where water collected after heavy rains. Most of the time it was dry and solid. But with the right preparation, it could become something else entirely. I started with research. I looked up soil composition charts for my area. I studied drainage patterns. I even called my old college roommate who'd become a civil engineer and asked him about soil saturation and load-bearing capacity. "Why do you want to know about soil engineering?" he asked. "Just curious about how to make land hold water better," I said. "Are you planning to build a pond?" "Something like that." He explained the science behind it. How clay soil could hold water like a sponge. How sand could create drainage problems. How the right combination of materials could create a surface that looked solid but would collapse under the weight of a vehicle. "It's basically quicksand," he said, "but with clay instead of sand. Very dangerous if you're not careful." "Good to know," I said. The next step was materials. I needed clay soil, sand, and water. Lots of water. The clay and sand I could buy from a landscaping company in town. The water was easy, I had a well and plenty of hose. But I also needed a way to control when the trap would be ready. I couldn't just leave a muddy mess in the middle of my field. I needed something that would look normal until the exact moment I wanted it to be dangerous. That's when I remembered the old irrigation system my grandfather had installed decades ago. Buried pipes that could flood specific sections of the field when needed. The system hadn't been used in years, but the pipes were still there, still connected to the main water line. It took me 3 days to dig up the pipes and repair them. Another 2 days to install new control valves that I could operate remotely. When I was done, I had a system that could flood a 50-foot section of the field in less than 10 minutes. The final step was the most important. I needed to make sure the trap would only affect the trespassers, not innocent people who might accidentally wander onto my property. And I needed to make sure it would be embarrassing rather than dangerous. I spent hours calculating the right mixture of clay, sand, and water. Too much water and someone could actually sink and get hurt. Too little and the trap wouldn't work. I needed something that would bog down a car without putting anyone in real danger. After a week of preparation, I was ready. The trap was set. The irrigation system was connected. The remote control was in my pocket. All I had to do was wait for the sisters to come back. I didn't have to wait long. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the familiar sound of sports car engines. Not just one car this time. 3 cars just like the previous weekend. The red BMW, the white Mercedes, and the black Range Rover. I watched from my kitchen window as they pulled up to my property line. The same group of people as before, plus a few new faces. They were already laughing and talking, clearly planning another photo shoot on my property. I grabbed the remote control and headed outside. The first sister was directing traffic, telling the other drivers where to park. She had her professional camera again and she was already taking pictures of the group. They were treating this like some kind of event. "Okay everyone," she called out, "we're going to drive through the field in a convoy. Sarah, you film from the Mercedes. Janet, you get shots from the Range Rover. This is going to be amazing content." Content. They were turning my property into content for their social media accounts. I watched as they got back into their cars and started driving onto my property. The red BMW was in the lead, followed by the white Mercedes with the Range Rover bringing up the rear. They were driving slowly this time, probably to make it easier to film. Perfect. That would give me plenty of time to activate the trap once they were in position. The BMW reached the low spot in my field where I'd prepared the trap. I could see both sisters in the front seats laughing and talking. The passenger was filming with her phone, probably doing a live stream or recording a video to post later. I waited until all 3 cars were in the target zone. Then I pressed the button on the remote control. For a moment, nothing happened. The cars kept driving, the people kept laughing, everything seemed normal. Then the water started flowing. Hidden beneath the surface, the irrigation pipes began flooding the prepared clay and sand mixture. Within seconds, the solid-looking ground began to soften. Within a minute, it was becoming mud. The BMW was the first to notice something was wrong. The car started to wobble slightly, like it was driving on an uneven surface. The driver slowed down, probably thinking she'd hit a rough patch. That's when the front wheels started to sink. It happened gradually at first, just a few inches. But as the water continued to flow and the clay became more saturated, the sinking accelerated. The sister driving the BMW tried to accelerate, but that only made things worse. The spinning wheels dug deeper into the mud, and the car began to settle into the trap like it was sinking into quicksand. Behind them, the Mercedes and Range Rover were experiencing the same problem. The drivers were gunning their engines, trying to power through what they thought was just a muddy patch. But the harder they tried to escape, the deeper they sank. Within 5 minutes, all 3 cars were stuck up to their wheel wells in thick, gooey mud. The passengers started getting out to assess the situation. That's when things got really entertaining. The first person to step out of the BMW was the passenger sister. She was wearing white designer sneakers and skinny jeans. The moment her foot touched the ground, she sank ankle-deep into the mud. "Oh my God!" she screamed, trying to pull her foot out. "My shoes." Her sister, the driver, was smarter. She stayed in the car and tried to reverse. But the BMW was well and truly stuck. The engine revved, the wheels spun, and more mud sprayed everywhere. In the Mercedes, 2 women were trying to get out at the same time. One of them made it to solid ground, but the other wasn't so lucky. She slipped and fell backward into the mud, landing on her designer handbag. The Range Rover passengers were having the worst time of all. The driver, a man in his 40s wearing what looked like a $1,000 suit, had stepped out directly into the deepest part of the trap. He was stuck up to his knees and couldn't move. "Help me," he yelled to his passengers. "I can't get out." One of the women in the Range Rover tried to help him, but when she got out of the car, she sank into the mud too. Soon, both of them were stuck, calling for help from the others. I watched all of this from my kitchen window and I couldn't help but smile. These people had been trespassing on my property for weeks, treating it like their personal playground. Now they were getting a taste of what happens when you don't respect other people's land. But the best part was yet to come. The first sister, the one who'd been so confident about her legal right to be on my property, was standing next to the BMW trying to call for help. Her white sneakers were ruined, her jeans were covered in mud, and her phone was getting splattered with every step. "We need a tow truck," she was saying into her phone. 3 tow trucks. We're stuck in a field. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could guess what they were being told. Tow trucks don't usually come out to private property to pull cars out of mud, especially not when those cars are there illegally. After a few minutes of arguing with whoever was on the phone, she hung up and looked around at her friends. They were all muddy, frustrated, and starting to realize that this wasn't going to be as easy to fix as they'd thought. That's when she spotted me standing in my kitchen window. "You," she yelled, pointing at me. "You did this." I opened my window and called back. "Did what?" "You set a trap. This is entrapment." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "That's just a low spot in my field. Gets muddy when it rains." "It hasn't rained in a week." "Underground spring," I said. "Sometimes it bubbles up. You'd know that if you'd asked permission to be on my property." She started marching toward my house, but with every step, her feet sank deeper into the mud. By the time she'd made it halfway, she was practically walking through quicksand. "You can't do this," she shouted. "This is illegal. We're going to sue you." "For what?" I called back. "You're trespassing on my property. I didn't make you drive through that mud. You chose to do that. We have a right to be here." "According to who?" "Our lawyer." "Well, maybe your lawyer can come pull you out." I closed the window and went back to watching the show. For the next hour, I watched these entitled people try to figure out how to get unstuck. They tried pushing the cars. They tried using floor mats as traction. They even tried digging with their bare hands. Nothing worked. The mud was too thick, too deep, and too well engineered. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. Finally, one of them got smart and called 911. I could hear the sirens in the distance getting closer. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived first, followed by a fire truck and an ambulance. The emergency responders took one look at the situation and started laughing. "Let me guess," one of the deputies said. "You got stuck in old Henderson's mud trap." "Henderson?" the first sister asked. "The farmer who owns this property. He's been dealing with trespassers for weeks. Looks like he finally got tired of it." "This is illegal," she protested. "He can't set traps on his property." "Actually," the deputy said, "he can. As long as it's not designed to cause serious injury. And from what I can see, this is just mud. Embarrassing but not dangerous. We could have drowned." The deputy looked at the mud, which was maybe 18 inches deep at its worst. "In a foot and a half of mud? I don't think so." We want to press charges. For what? Assault? Battery? Attempted murder? The deputy sighed. Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property. We've got reports of you doing this for weeks. The landowner has every right to protect his property. We have a legal right to be here. Do you have documentation of that right? She paused. Our lawyer is working on it. Well, until your lawyer provides proof of an easement, you're trespassing. And I'm going to have to issue citations. While the deputy was writing tickets, the fire department was figuring out how to extract the cars. It took 3 tow trucks, a small crane, and 2 hours of work to pull all 3 vehicles out of the mud. The cars were a mess. Mud covered everything from the wheels to the windows. The BMW's white leather interior was splattered with brown goo. The Mercedes had mud in the air vents. The Range Rover's engine was making a grinding noise that suggested expensive repairs in the near future. But the people were an even bigger mess. Designer clothes ruined. Expensive shoes destroyed. Perfectly styled hair caked with mud. They looked like they'd been wrestling with pigs. And the best part? Someone had been filming the whole thing. One of the women who'd managed to stay relatively clean had been recording everything on her phone. The stuck cars, the rescue efforts, the argument with the deputy. All of it was captured in high-definition video. Are you going to post that online? I heard one of the muddy women ask. Are you kidding? The woman with the phone replied. This is going viral. Rich people get stuck in mud while trespassing. This is comedy gold. The first sister, the one who'd been so confident about her legal rights, looked horrified. You can't post that. Delete it. Delete it? This is the best content I've ever captured. My followers are going to love this. I'll sue you too. For what? Recording something that happened in public? This isn't public. This is private property. Exactly. Private property that you were trespassing on. I watched from my window as the reality of the situation finally hit them. Not only were they stuck, embarrassed, and facing trespassing charges, but their humiliation was going to be broadcast to the world. The tow trucks finally finished pulling the cars out of the mud. The vehicles were technically drivable, but they were going to need serious cleaning and repairs. The BMW alone probably had thousands of dollars in damage. As the group prepared to leave, the first sister walked over to where I was standing by my front door. This isn't over, she said. We're going to sue you for everything you're worth. Good luck with that, I said. You were trespassing on my property. I was protecting it. You set a trap. I maintain my irrigation system. Not my fault you drove through it. We'll see what a jury thinks. Will we? Because I think a jury's going to want to know why you were on my property in the first place. And why you kept coming back after I told you to stop. And why you cut my chain. And why you ignored my no trespassing signs. She glared at me for a moment, then turned and walked away. Her white sneakers squished with every step, leaving muddy footprints on my driveway. As the convoy of muddy cars drove away, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. These entitled people had been trespassing on my property for weeks, treating it like their personal playground. They'd ignored my signs, cut my chain, and laughed at my requests to leave. But now they'd learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. Actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are muddy, embarrassing, and expensive. The video of their mishap was online within hours. It spread like wildfire on social media, with thousands of people sharing, commenting, and laughing at the entitled trespassers who got stuck in the mud. The comments were brutal but fair. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Maybe next time they'll respect private property. That farmer is a genius. Justice served. Within a week, the video had millions of views. News stations picked up the story. Internet comedians made reaction videos. The Karen sisters' mud trap became a cultural phenomenon. As for the sisters themselves, they never came back to my property. Their lawyer never provided proof of any easement. The trespassing charges stuck, and they had to pay fines plus the cost of repairing the damage to my field. But the best part was the lesson they learned. For the first time in their lives, they faced real consequences for their entitled behavior. They discovered that money and attitude can't protect you from everything. Sometimes the world pushes back. And sometimes that pushback comes in the form of a muddy field and a farmer who's had enough of people walking all over him. My property is peaceful now. No more trespassers. No more damaged crops. No more entitled people treating my land like their personal playground. I kept the irrigation system though, just in case. Because you never know when someone else might need to learn the same lesson about respecting other people's property. And when that day comes, I'll be ready. The mud trap is still there, waiting under the surface. A reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are stickier than you expect. As for the Karen sisters? Well, let's just say their next shortcut is going to be a lot longer. And a lot less muddy. Some people never learn. But these two? They learned the hard way that when you mess with a farmer's land, you might just get stuck with the consequences.